Hey everyone, it's Dan from Cardinal, and I'm excited to share with you our webinar, Don't Leave Your Shoppers Out in the Cold. Get ready for PSD2 SCA. We'll be doing more webinars in the future, so feel free to send us your webinar topic ideas by contacting us at info@cardinalcommerce.com. Now, let's get into the webinar. So as we said before, we're going to be talking about how we can get your online shopping cart ready for PSD2 SCA. So, things are different this year. There are a lot of other forces in play this holiday season other than the usual concerns. This year, the new PSD2 requirement for strong customer authentication, or SCA, is going to be in play in Europe. And though there have been announcements that in some of the EEA countries that SCA won't be enforced this holiday season, it's best to be aware of the mandate and continue preparations. Many other countries have mandates too, so you'll want to know where authentication may be required. We'll talk more about this in the next few slides. This is also the first year during the holiday shopping season that EMV 3D Secure will be widely available. Though 3DS 1.0 is still around, many issuers are now running EMV 3DS, so it's a great time for merchants to take advantage of EMV 3DS's benefits. 10 times more data used for authentication, which enables more confident risk decisions by the issuer, minimal impact on the consumer during checkout in most cases, especially in non-mandated regions, and authentication of transactions from any device. So this means changes are coming. Digital commerce is the fastest growing area of payments as more connected devices become payment devices. What you see here is the current state. We have an enormous amount of growth, 32% year-over-year growth in global online sales. But with that comes an increase in global declines as well. That increase in global declines is at the same rate or approximately at the same rate as global sales, but 3D Secure can help improve that performance by improving approval rates. We are going to be passing more information to the issuer, and that additional information is going to help them make better decisions. The merchant side works the same way. The merchant side is going to use more secure information to make better choices, resulting in less declines and a better consumer experience. So why are we doing that? Well, if you have a false decline, everyone loses. There's basically two sides to the story. One, merchants may not be able to sell their products and services, meaning that the consumer will go somewhere else if they're declined. Or number two, the consumer might blame their issuer and pull out a different card in their wallet. So while the merchant might be able to make the transaction, the issuer may be impacted because it's possible that the consumer will no longer reach for that card to make those purchases. This can be impactful, particularly for types of transactions where that card is being used over and over. So the point is, everyone loses in these situations. We definitely want to see a decrease in declines. When we implement 3D Secure, we are not only helping merchants, we are helping the entire ecosystem to make buying online a seamless experience. All right, so let's talk a little bit about strong customer authentication. So I've mentioned it a few times, but SCA is a key requirement of the Second Payment Services Directive, PSD2 for short, for digital transactions in Europe, and it went into effect on September 14th of this year. Some of the objectives of PSD2 include enhancing security, protecting consumers, and enhancing customer convenience. SCA itself is basically two-factor authentication. It will require authentication to use at least two things, either something the consumer has, something the consumer knows, or something the consumer is. The issuer is responsible for performing this authentication, and today we're going to be talking about how we can enable issuers to perform SCA using 3D Secure. All right, but first we have to figure out if SCA actually applies to your business. So if your acquiring bank is in the EEA and your customers are using cards issued in the EEA, then you need to support an SCA solution for those transactions after September 14th. But in some cases, specific types of payments may be exempted from SCA. If you are able to take advantage of one of the SCA exemptions, like trusted beneficiary, low risk, or low value transactions, then SCA is not required. Some transactions may also be considered out of scope. Examples of these include one leg out transactions, where either the issuer or the acquirer are not in the EEA, corporate cards, and merchant-initiated transactions. But there's a big difference between out of scope and exemptions. Scope means the transaction doesn't even get covered by PSD2. So if you're out of scope, then PSD2 doesn't really apply. If you use an exemption, you'll need to follow exemption rules, and in those cases, you are often still required to run SCA. The result of this means you really need to get into 3D Secure before you can get out of it. Some merchants focus on getting exemptions before they are focused on the benefits of 3D Secure technologies, when the focus should really be the other way around. I hinted about this before, but as you might have heard, there's a lot of news surrounding the delay of PSD2 SCA. Some country authorities have issued press releases indicating delays for up to 18 months after September 14th, but not all countries. These individual extensions give merchants, issuers, PSPs, and the networks flexibility in being SCA ready. This is due to the complexity of the requirements. Recent announcements on the 2 factors of authentication, lack of preparedness in the ecosystem, and ultimately the consumer impact for card-not-present purchases would have been too high to fully roll out SCA requirements on September 14th. With that said, though, we strongly recommend continuing efforts to update your solution support for EMV 3D Secure, including version 2.1, which is available now, and version 2.2 coming soon. The grace period gives you the chance and extra time to do this implementation process, so it shouldn't be taken for granted, even if you're in one of the countries where there is an extension. This process takes time, so it's important that you have an implementation plan in place and stick to that plan. So yes, some of the countries have delayed SCA enforcements, but it's important to note that contactless cards are not included in that delay and require SCA today. Now, it's important to understand it's not a blanket extension of 18 months for every country in the EEA. So there is still expectation today that some countries will still require SCA on CMP transactions. Okay, so let's talk about how Cardinal's 3D Secure shopping cart modules solve for SCA. EMV 3DS is an important advancement created to accelerate digital commerce with fast, secure authentication. With 3DS, authentication happens before authorization in a collaborative process between the consumer and the issuer. So if we're talking about adding authentication into your shopping cart, we're going to need to put that into your process before your current authorization. Authentication verifies the cardholder's identity and complements authorization to strengthen the issuer confidence in approving transactions. The point is, authentication and authorization just work together. So when you implement authentication, it's going to have to be in the same environment where you initiate your authorization. EMV 3DS is an improvement over the original version of 3D Secure, and it's continuously being developed to meet new mandates and requirements, particularly PSD2 SCA. So what you're going to get is an engaging shopping experience with limited friction, biometric authentication, exemptions available, and simple implementation for merchants. You'll also get flexible device and channel support, optimized for all of your devices, and customizable screens for issuers and merchants. More data also means more confident risk decisions for issuers. So this means 10 times more data shared by the merchant, 135 data elements in total, and including non-payment related data such as device ID and transaction history. Finally, it will track changes in regulations and mandates to stay up to date, which will enable PSD2 compliance for issuers, including dynamic linking, transaction risk analysis, strong customer authentication, trusted listing, and biometrics. It also enhances risk scoring, enabling issuers to take a full advantage of PSD2 SCA exemptions. By sending more data to issuers, we are giving them the opportunity to reduce the amount of fraud in the ecosystem and meet the guidelines needed to perform transaction risk analysis so that fewer transactions will require SCA. So, are we going to that? Well, we need more data. There are 10 times more data passed with EMV 3DS. Every transaction has greater dimension and context because data is shared between all of the stakeholders. First being merchants, who already have access to this data because it's inside of their ecosystem. The results are then sent to the acquirers so they understand an EMV 3DS transaction is being performed. Issuers will then receive this large data payload, what you see here on the right side of the screen, of EMV 3DS data so they can make a better decision. And then, of course, 3DS service providers. Our position is to be the connective tissue so that all this data is delivered in a safe and secure manner. In the majority of transactions, sharing all this data with the issuer happens behind the scenes with no impact on the consumer during the checkout process. This creates a fast and secure authentication that results in fewer declined transactions, increased approvals, improved cardholder trust, and an overall better shopping experience. So let's talk a little bit more about where this fits. Authentication is added to your process during checkout. It does not replace the tools that you already have. EMV 3DS authentication is part of a layered approach and is a balanced way to decrease fraud and increase approvals. Notice that we didn't pull anything out of your transaction flow. We're adding a step to secure it. So this additional shared data helps authenticate the identity of the cardholder, and your issuers can authorize with greater confidence. Now that you know where it fits in your flow, let's talk about the positioning. There are multiple 3D Secure protocols, but the major groups are the legacy 3DS 1.0. This technology is still widely available today and will still remain in effect for quite some time. It accommodates many of the SCA requirements already, but has been improved with the new versions of EMV 3DS 2.1 and 2.2. These newer protocols also accommodate SCA requirements, including biometrics, and supports authentication in non-mandated regions. As of today, EMV 3DS version 2.1 is the latest available version, and EMV 3DS version 2.2 will be available in early 2020 and has extended support for exemptions. Now it's your turn. It's time to connect your shopping experience to 3D Secure. Many of our shopping cart and gateway partners are compatible with Cardinal's 3D Secure solution. The steps are simple. You download our module from your shopping cart store. You'll be connected to both your payment gateway and Cardinal's authentication solution. Our module acts as both connections for you. Setup is super simple. Just enter your credentials and go. You'll have credentials for your payment service provider and Cardinal. And just like that, your shopping cart is ready for PSD2 SCA. Don't worry, if you don't see your shopping cart here, we're continuing to add shopping carts all of the time. The fact is, you need to prepare now for PSD2 SCA, and we're here to help you. We've been doing authentication since authentication has been around, and we're continuously using our experience and knowledge to improve and raise the bar on authentication. Our proven technology and data intelligence helps you optimize and balance reducing fraud and increasing approvals. All of this while focused on improving the cardholder's experience for a happy shopper journey. So that wraps up our webinar. Thank you so much for listening. Remember to submit your webinar topic ideas and check out psd2.cardinalcommerce.com for more information on how you can be PSD2 SCA ready.